everyone, Kaya Savas here for Brand New All Access. I'm here with composer Theodore Shapiro. Teddy, thank you so much for joining us. Joining me again.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. It's great to be here.
So last time I think I drove out to your studio. That was back when Ghostbusters I think came out.
Oh,
so it's
wow.
been a while.
Right. Been a minute. Yeah.
So for anyone, so for people who've not seen our last chat, just maybe wanted to revisit kind of a little bit of your origin story. Like when you were growing up, what really got you into music, and what was kind of that turning point that you remember that was like, okay, this is going to be my career from now on?
Right. Well, yeah. So I started playing the piano at a pretty young age. I think around 5 or 6, and I loved it from the time I started, and it was always something that was one of my, it was one of my primary interests. I mean, I had other interests as a kid. I played sports and did other things, but music was always sort of my sort of an arena in which that I loved, and in which I felt like I stood out from other people. But I grew up thinking, because my parents told me so, that I would eventually find a more stable career. And I went off to college, and when I got to college, I found that even in this sort of larger pond of people, I still felt like I stood out a little bit with music, and I was as talented as anybody else, around me. And, and I just got to a point where I thought, I should pursue this. I only get to live one life. And so I made the decision to major in music, and that was the big moment.
So one thing that I immediately fell in love with your music was the fact that it just seems like you never get typecast into a single genre. I feel like you approach everything from comedy to thrillers to action to any kind of stuff that comes your way. And I'm curious, as a composer, is that something that it just happened by chance from the people that you work with, or did you consciously was like, I don't want to get kind of put in every corner, I want to challenge myself in different genres and stuff like that?
Well, I mean, I definitely had a lot of success early on in my career working on comedies, and so I have felt a need and a desire to try to push away from that a little bit, so that I wasn't overly typecast. I still get called a lot for comedies, but over the last bunch of years, I've been lucky enough to work on a lot of things that aren't comedies, and work with directors who maybe had done some comedies and who are also interested in doing other things. So, the job is the same,
right?
Whatever genre you're working in, your job is always to help the filmmaker tell the story. And, it's a job that I take as seriously if I'm working on a drama, as I take it if I'm working on, Blades of Glory. They're all, it's always about storytelling and helping the filmmaker's craft a satisfying narrative. And that's what I love about the job.
So speaking of just you say it's all about telling the story. So I'm curious in terms of your general approach, and I'm sure this is going to differ between project to project, but where does the first note come from for you? Where is that kind of origin point that you go to kind of be like, oh, let's pull the first seed, the first idea out of your head? Do you like to speak with the director if you're on early enough, read the script, or do you like to wait for that first lock picture, or do you just kind of noodle during production? Like, what's kind of your process typically?
I really like to start as early as possible. And it varies a little bit depending upon what type of film it is. I think that there are certain, animation, for example, is something that it's very difficult to work ahead of picture in animation, because
Right.
it's so specific to what the picture is doing. But in general, I like to start at the script phase, just reading the script, seeing what ideas come to mind, and starting to write based on that. I just find that anything that I can do to avoid the presence of temp music is really helpful. You only get one shot at a blank canvas. And so, to my mind, I'm willing to put in the extra work to, to start writing themes before they shoot, or while they're shooting, so that the film doesn't get the fingerprints of another film score on it.
Right.
And because, it's not just, oh, the director gets used to it. And so that creates a problem for my process. I think that the composer gets used to it too. You see a film that's effectively temped, and you think like, oh, well, okay, well, that kind of works, like that, that tempo is good, or it just puts blinders up for you that makes it really hard sometimes, unless it's wrong, it makes it really hard to see the film in a fresh way. And of course, it's that way for the director too. So I think that your best shot at coming up with original material is by reacting, is reacting on a script level, in that it forces you in a way to really think hard about concept, and be guided by concept, as opposed to, let's do this kind of music. Or, I think that the more you separate yourself from first of all, reacting to temp music, and second of all, even reacting to another musical reference of any kind, even something that's in your head, is really a good way to catalyze yourself to get to something that surprises you or that's unique.
And has there ever been, I've talked to a lot of music editors, and one person told me that they try not to really screw the composer by like putting a really good temp or something like that, and kind of making sure that it kind of guides, because I get your point. I totally agree with everything you said, because like even a decent temp that just helps give an idea will influence the edit, and the kind of lock the pacing of a scene into a certain way, where it's like, as you as a composer only, I always equate it to like, you put your hand in the snow and you take it out, you can only really fit another hand in there, right? It's like,
right, exactly. That's exactly the case. And I've had so many experiences where I've looked at a scene that's temped a certain way, and I think like, okay, well, at least, here's this moment that the temp is not acknowledging at all. At least I'll acknowledge that moment. And then the reaction is, we really like the way it didn't acknowledge that moment, and so it's just very clear that it's just such a powerful fingerprint on the movie for everybody, and worth avoiding when possible.
Has it ever helped you? Has it ever been, is there an advantage to a temp ever, in your opinion?
I mean, I would say that I've certainly been in situations where my music was used in a temp, and that comforted the studio that I was the person capable of writing the score. Earlier on in my career, maybe where I was less established, and a well-executed temp can provide a really good template, but it's just harder to take that template and do something really original with it. It's just always a version of something else.
Right. Absolutely. I know. I totally agree. But speaking of, you've worked with a lot of filmmakers over the course of your career that you've built kind of lasting collaborative relationships with, like Ben Stiller and Paul Feig. And as a composer, what do you think is the key to a lasting relationship in this business? What keeps you coming back to work with certain people, and why do you think they keep coming back to you? What's kind of maybe the secret ingredient that keeps it lasting?
I mean, I think that there are aspects that go into, director composer collaborations that are aspects of any good relationship: trust, communication, openness. I feel like, all of the directors that I have really good lasting relationships with, we share those qualities in our relationship, where we trust one another, we're willing to push each other, we're willing to communicate openly and honestly, and have fun with one another, and just enjoy the process. And so that has really been, I've been very fortunate, because I really like my longtime collaborators as people, and it's a joy to get to go back to work with them every time.
And I'm sure you've encountered some filmmakers or producers that probably weren't the most fun to work with. So I'm curious, in your opinion and your point of view, your perspective, what are some traits that just really make for a bad working environment? Is there traits that, I like to ask that question for people who are maybe want to be a director or a producer and need to avoid, how to work with a composer. So like, what traits do you really just rub you the wrong way?
I think that the worst thing that some directors do, and this has not happened that often to me, is create an environment where failure is unacceptable, where it's like, boy, you messed up that cue. God, I don't know if you get this, or leave you with that feeling. And I've definitely experienced it. And it's a terrible feeling, and it totally stifles creativity, and makes you aim the ball instead of throw the ball. And it's the worst thing you could do.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I mentioned earlier Ben Stiller, who you've done an amazing string of work with, and since we'll be jumping into Severance just in a bit, I thought we could maybe walk the Ben Stiller road and maybe go through your projects, and you can just do a quick little, maybe, remember what it was like working on that score, or a little snapshot. But first, I just would like to hear the story of, how did you meet Ben and how did you start working with him?
Way back when, in the early 2000s, I did two movies. I did Along Came Polly and Starsky and Hutch, both of which he was in.
Right.
And he really liked both of those scores. And right around the same time, they were getting ready to finish Dodgeball. They needed a composer, and so he asked me to work on that. He's the producer of Dodgeball,
right?
And so that was sort of how we started working. And Dodgeball was a project that went really well. Where things just fell into place in a very easy way, and the movie was a success, and so that kind of got us started on a good foot. And then his next film that he directed was Tropic Thunder, and he asked me to work on that, and so that was our first collaboration as director and composer.
So let's start with Tropic Thunder. Tropic Thunder. I mean, I love that Kino. I don't know if you saw Kino is doing a 4K restoration of the film. Yeah, no, Kino Lorber. Amazing. They just announced on 4K Blu-ray they're doing Tropic Thunder, the director's cut. So
that's incredible.
It's a fan favorite. It's one of my favorites, and take us back to that time, because I remember that time. That movie was such a brilliant satire, as well as just a character comedy, but also playing on the big war movies at the time, like Black Hawk Down and stuff like that. So I'm curious, like, what was your approach for the score? Because if you take that score away from the movie, it's a intense, great score that could work in an action like war film.
Well, so I mean, that was definitely the approach, was to just treat it like a serious action film, and let the comedy come out in relief, and that was the approach the whole time. And I would say it's funny, as a filmmaker, Ben was much more, everything was much faster paced, if you look at that compared to Severance. So there was a lot of push to sort of have everything be kind of building all the time, and
Yeah.
it was pretty exhausting to write, because sort of everything needed to be building and getting huger and huger, and it was a challenge to keep finding new ways to elevate the music. But then somehow at the end, I think it came out pretty well, and I think that it's such a good film. It's so well directed, and I think that the musical approach, helps with the storytelling.
And we got another fan favorite, Zoolander 2, of course. Talk about, working on them, such the follow up to such a iconic hit.
I think that it's really an exercise in letting things breathe where they need to breathe. I think that when you're working on that kind of an approach where the music is sort of very deadly serious and sort of this action mystery approach, a lot of times you help the comedy not by accenting things, but by leaving space for things to play out and be funny without comment. And so, there's a combination there of, finding moments to be huge and outrageous, and, and there's a lot of screaming French horns in the score, and, doing all sorts of wild stuff. But probably a lot of the comedy comes from just leaving space for people to be funny.
Is spotting a comedy, like, is that really kind of the essential way of figuring out where the music would work?
With most of my directors, we barely spot anymore.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, we just get started and see what happens, and we figure it out as we go.
That's all. I mean, that's the trust you were talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So before we jump into Severance, I have to touch on Walter Mitty, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, which in my opinion, is one of the most beautiful scores I think that you've written, and that I've still stays with me to this day since I've heard it. And it just is this beautiful, touching. It feels like a comforting hug. It's a nuance into Walter Mitty's mind and bringing that character. So talk about, working with Jose Gonzalez and coming up with those melodies, and what was that process like? It's such a beautiful score, and I'm curious what your kind of approach was.
Well, so it was always the idea from the beginning of the process, from our first meeting, that we would find some artist to work with whose voice would be a primary instrument in the score. And we both got excited about the idea of Jose. I was a fan of his before that, and Ben really liked his work, and we were fortunate to have landed on him because he's just such a lovely person, and was so easy to work with and egoless, and and had great ideas, and his guitar technique is incredible. And so we really were lucky that we found him. Early on, it's funny, early on in the process, while Ben was shooting, I started writing themes. And I'd written 2 themes that I was happy with. And I thought, I'm just going to write one more, just one more, just see if I can come up with something different. And that was how I came up with the main theme of the film. And it just kind of poured out very easily. And I actually thought that Ben wouldn't respond to it. I thought that he would find it too melancholy, but actually, that was the one he really latched onto. And thank goodness. I mean, the recurring theme with Ben over and over again is that his instincts are so excellent. And I really feel that I can trust where he's going to take something. And that was, another example where where I was really guided. I mean, I wrote the music, but I was guided by him responding to that material and pushing us down that path. And then, once we had started down that path, it became a theme that was extremely adaptable and flexible, and we were just able to take it to a lot of different places.
Because I know you mentioned, it kind of starts off melancholic and maybe a little bit sad and introverted, but then you can just like open that thing up, and it can be sweeping, it can be adventurous. Yep. Yeah, I just love the way it bookends towards the end. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
So let's
I love that movie.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so underrated. If nobody's seen Secret Life of Walter Mitty, go check it out right now. Have yourself a nice emotion. It's not straight off comedy. It's a great character drama. It's a great film. Yeah. So let's jump into Severance. I love this series so much. It's so meticulously crafted from every aspect, from the production, from art direction, cinematography, performance, and of course your score. So what was the pitch that you heard from Ben? And what were the first discussions about music when you first came onto the project?
Like with other collaborations with Ben, I read the script. My first thought was, oh, okay, well, so we should do something that explores the idea of the dichotomy between innie and outie, that we'll have one palette for inside and one palette for outside. And he said, yeah, that sounds good. And so I started writing themes and just sort of throwing a bunch of ideas out there and sending it to him. And he was excited by what I was writing. And in February of 2020, I flew to New York to meet with him, and I saw like all of the visual design ideas and some of the sets, and just saw all of the stuff that they were working on. It was incredible. And we listened back to some of the stuff that I'd written, and there was a B section of one of the cues that I'd written that he returned to a couple of times. And I thought, like, oh, that's interesting. He keeps going back there. He's responding to something there. Like, I wonder if there's more to be done with that. And it had this 4-chord progression that I thought was interesting. And, but it was very like electronic and beat driven in nature. And so I got home after that, and I sat down at the piano and I started playing those 4 chords, but just at the piano, sort of very much in the way that the main title begins. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Like, that's a different approach that would play this. It wouldn't be about innies and outies. It would be about just sort of the mystery of the whole mise en scène. And so I wrote probably like a 2.5-minute suite based on that idea. And I sent it to Ben and didn't hear from him for like weeks. And I thought, I guess he didn't go for that. That's too bad. Like, I like it. And then finally one day he called. He was like, oh, this is great. I love this. And so he got excited about it. And then once I got that encouragement, I just started seeing like, okay, what else can I do with this? Like, how much can I keep pulling apart this idea of this theme melodically and harmonically? And so I just started writing and generating all of this material that really sprung from that main title idea. And that was the foundation of the score.
So when you tackled the series head on, were you, I guess, scoring as episodes were shot and completed, or were you waiting till was there everything done beforehand? Like,
no, I was working as they were working, and so by the time they were really working on episodes, where they were really starting to put episodes together, I had generated a pretty large library of material, so we could avoid temp music. There was no temp, it was all original music that was being cut in. And so it was a combination of, them sending me things, sending me some things that worked great as they cut them in, some things that needed some attention, some things where I needed to just find a different approach.
Right.
And that's how we worked the whole time. That was how we made it through the season.
And were you? I mean, I'm assuming that you had the scripts beforehand, so you knew where the arc of the season was.
Yes.
So I guess when you're working on a TV show, and then in this fashion where you're kind of writing stuff beforehand, are you thinking about how the themes are going to arc throughout the season? Are you tackling this like a 9-hour or so film, or do you use the episodes as chapter marks to kind of like, here's my checkpoint, here's my checkpoint?
I would say so. In this is the way in which we were grappling with the arc. We came to understand at a certain point that when we got to the end of episode 8 and episode 9, things were going to need to ramp up. And we had this idea, or I guess I had this idea, that we would just through compose the entire episode 9 and make it not just through composed, but to make it feel as much as possible like a single piece of music going all the way through.
And that's what it felt like.
Well, that's good.
It's like you're just like, ugh, like the entire time.
So I wrote a large amount of material really with the end of the show in mind, and so that was the nod to figuring out the larger arc piece of it, and we also definitely had conversations about where to deploy certain themes that were variations of the main theme, sort of throughout the show, and and we just kind of figured it out on the fly.
Yeah, and you mentioned before how you when you kind of found the idea for the main kind of central theme, that you were just kind of commenting on the mystery of it, and I literally, that's how I was like, the score is almost self-aware that it's scoring a mystery show in a bit, but it's also because it's a little bit like, something's not what it seems, but it's also building these character and emotional arcs so well. And I mean, there's just tragic moments in the series, and I found myself crying all this time. So how do you make sure the score kind of, I guess, does both, keeps things mysterious, but also allows the audience to kind of just give in to the characters like that?
I mean, just intuitively. I mean, that is the honest answer to the question. Yeah. I think that we just kept exploring, and when we didn't have, if there wasn't material that existed in the stuff that I had written early on that filled the need of a scene, then I wrote that material, and then we had, and then that added another layer that could be added to the palette. And there's a raft of material. Oh gosh, I don't want to use a spoiler that occurs.
Well, I would love to talk about it. I think the series is out. I'll put a spoiler warning before.
Okay, great.
So let's get nitty gritty. Hey, friendly warning to anyone who is listening and not watching. Skip ahead to 30 minutes and 48 seconds to avoid spoilers.
So yeah, I mean, there's a variation on the theme that is used towards the end of episode 4, when Helly is about to attempt suicide, and yes, the beginning of episode 5, when we are grappling with what happened on the tail end of the cliffhanger. it sort of starts out with the chord progression of the main theme, but then sort of has its own twists and turns, and it just takes a more emotional approach to it's a more emotional variation on the theme, and it was something that was written specifically for the scene, and then once we had that, it really became something that could underpin a lot of Helly's struggles as we went through the episode. So it was just an example of where we found kind of new language to support where the story was going.
I do want to mention the amazing main title sequence that is like, so how refreshing is it to see a near 90 second main title sequence in today's world of television, where things can be just like title and go. But like, I mean, the fact that, and the intro was done by visual effects artist Oliver Latta, who's best known as online as Extra Wig, and I think Ben mentioned, I think on Seth Meyers, that he found him on Instagram and saw that. So how did that title sequence come together? Did you send a kind of a locked suite of that over, and then he animated to it? So
yes, but it was it was just so cool because Ben generously kind of let me into the whole process. So I was on meetings, generally speaking, Oliver was in Berlin and Ben's in New York. So generally speaking, I was getting up at, very early hours to jump on a Zoom to see what they were talking about. But I mean, Oliver is so brilliant.
Yeah.
And he had so many good ideas. I mean, there were so many good ideas that didn't make it into the main title sequence. I mean, he was just kind of bursting with creativity, and so it's just another example of Ben being such a good director, because there were so many good ideas to choose from, and I think that he led him in this direction where there's a very fluid story being told that is, hallucinogenic but also cogent, and so that was incredible to get to witness. As far as my piece of it, I took that 2.5 minute piece that I alluded to, that was the one that I sent to Ben that he ultimately responded to, and I whittled it down to 1.5 minutes. And thank goodness for Ben, because he was just like, no, this is going to be the length of the main title sequence, and that was just always what it was.
And I don't, from what I recall, it doesn't appear till episode 2, right? I think
that's right. Yes.
Yeah. First episode doesn't have it, but
that's right.
And I hate that skip intro thing that's now the default on streaming.
Right.
But I always let it play because it's such a perfect entryway into each episode. Even if I'm binging great. 2 episodes at once, I'm like, I have to. And there's so many details in that sequence, so you can look at where's the black goo and coming through.
I know.
It's so layered. I love it.
It's incredible work. I'm very, very honored to have my music as part of that sequence, because it's so remarkable visually.
And you got to do in the series some diegetic music, some source music.
Yes.
So, and he released Music of Wellness as a single, which is, one of the examples. And so what was that process like? Did they have that music on set to play? Did you compose that beforehand, or was that all?
No, you're talking about the wellness music.
Just, that, or any of the diet, because there's other stuff in there too.
They sent me the scene, and so they needed some sort of gentle spa music to go with it. And so that was super fun to write. I mean, I really had a good time doing that. And there's
challenging where it doesn't come across as tongue in cheek, but actually feels serious in the show, and still feels creepy or wrong, or something's off. It must have been, I don't know. Did you just listen to a bunch of spa music?
Honestly, it just poured out of me. I don't know where it came from. I did not listen to things. The thing I like about a lot of that music is that it's got these sort of high frequencies that kind of tickle the back of my neck a little bit. And it was fun to sort of find those kind of wind chimey sounds that are very soothing to me. But I must say, I was very surprised and pleasantly that after we released the soundtrack, I got a lot of messages on social media saying, where is the music? Where is the wellness music? Like, I need to have that track. And so after a certain amount of haranguing, I asked the good people of Lakeshore and Apple if they would be willing to release it as a single, and they did.
You're going to be getting a massage one day and it's just going to come on. You're going to be like, wait a tick. Were there any kind of moments or scenes throughout this season that were maybe particularly challenging? I know you said a lot of things kind of poured out, but were there something where like, oh, wait, how am I going to navigate this? Is there anything that kind of threw you for a loop, or was everything pretty straightforward? That seemed.
I mean, to be honest, the episode 9 was the biggest challenge, just because it became a little bit of a jigsaw puzzle, just getting everything to fit, and as they were editing, everything's just kind of sliding around, and at the end of the day, you have to make it all feel like one piece of music. And so it was a real team effort, I have to say, with a lot of credit to, first of all, the picture editor, Jeff Richmond, who was great with music to start with, and then my music editors, Sam Zanes and Felipe Pacheco, who did incredible work. So, it was really all hands on deck and a group effort.
I can't imagine, like, was the picture changing a lot? Was there a lot of, did you have to conform?
It was, not annoyingly so. I mean, it was, I would say that they were, this was not a situation throughout the season where it felt like they were being fussy with the picture. But
sometimes it needs to. I mean, just
They were working it.
And you're just massaging it out.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, like, because I always think, because that entire episode feels like a whole build, just kind of ascending up. And is there ever, like, how do you keep the tension going for an hour? Like, is it all about rhythms? It's about tempo? Is it about adding elements to the score? How do you just keep, raising it up that entire time?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of building and receding. If I can make another shout out, there was a huge assist played by my longtime sound designer, Chris Lane, who he created this whole library of rhythmic material that could sit under dialogue and be unobtrusive, but be driving tension and driving, pace. And so I was armed with this, this arsenal of rhythmic material that could really, really help keep tension going without taking up too much focus, and certainly without distracting from dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned, I asked you, was there anything that threw you for a loop or was challenging? Was there something that was just like a part of the season that was just super rewarding? I'm sure episode 9 was, once you cracked it, but was there anything that was just like a joy to score where you're like, oh, I love this scene, or I love this character? Is there a moment that really kind of sticks out to you that's really kind of a personal favorite?
I would say that oh man,
so many good moments.
there are a lot of good moments. I would say that the end of episode 3, where we're building up to Petey's demise, there was a really lovely space in the picture to play this nice variation of the theme while Adam Scott's character sort of walks across the plaza outside of Lumen, and just a very nice bit of visual storytelling, you know, that led to it was just a very nice opportunity to score a picture and drive us to that moment.
Yeah, well, I just congratulations on the whole season, and it's such a, I mean, I don't know, the show for me came out of nowhere. I was like, oh my God, this is like finally something I can latch onto. You know, I think I've heard people comparing it to Lost or, you know, something like that, but it's its own thing. It's so special. It's so unique, and the voices of the storytellers behind it, from Ben to, of course, the writer who created it, and Dan, what a wonderful script. I mean, I can't believe this is like his first like, you know, attempt at anything.
I know it's remarkable, and you know, and as you said, one of the great joys for me was just that it was watching the show as an audience member, and you know, when I work on features, you know, by the time you get to the end, you've seen the movie so many times, you've been to, you know, a million previews, and you know, you've just seen it and seen it and seen it, and you know, with this, I really got to sit down and watch it fairly fresh, you know, because there wasn't that same repetition of watching it over and over again. And you know, I just think it's so good, you know. I mean, forget about the music. I mean, I just think every department did such an outstanding job. And
everything clicks together. I mean, I just love, you know, I'm a cinephile, so I'm just, you know, I love the attention to detail. It's just amazing. You don't see, I mean, it's nothing's, every little frame was calculated. It's crazy.
Totally. So very, very proud to be part of it.
So as we wrap up, is there anything that's that you're coming up that you're allowed to say that you're working on? Are you going to be, I'm sure Severance season 2 will be coming eventually.
That will be coming eventually. I'm going to be working on that, and we're just finishing mixing Paul Feig's new movie, The School for Good and Evil, which is great fun. Massive score, you know, like 120 minutes of music, and
oh wow,
a lot of bodies in the room, and it was really a lot of fun to work on. So that should be good fun. It comes out, I think, in September.
And that must be refreshing after going through the pandemic and trying to work and record, you know. To kind of almost be back to normal a little bit.
Totally. No, it was thrilling to record, and the musicians made an amazing sound, and you know, everything that's fun to do as a composer.
Absolutely. Well, Teddy, it's always a joy. I love sitting and talking with you. I know it's been a while. We should do this again. Not let the gap go. Of course, when season 2 comes out, I'm going to be emailing you, be like, we got to talk about it.
Great, let's do it.
All right, well, thank you so much, and
thank you, Kai. All right, you too.